Hi there. I'm the Unprofessor. My name is Mike Clevin. You can look me up on Facebook or YouTube or on SoundCloud and Reverb Nation. I'm also a musician and I'm into politics. Ugh. Anyway, ancient history has become like a whole new revelation in the last few years and it's not. It's only natural that it's generalists that have transcended the rigid paradigms of academia. And I'm not going to go into that like so many videos do. It's pointless to do that because they're only going to listen once the whole cohesive things are presented to them as they have been before, including about things like, everything from the genetic, the ring, and the table of the elements and Newton and everything is all by dreams. It's all where it came from. Really, it is. Like Plato now. Plato is in Randall Carlson's current video that I don't know what date it is, and I'm sure it's before he's done other things since the revelations of the Hiawatha impact, which is the easiest term for the Greenland disaster. The meteorite that's been found in northern Greenland in 12,800. They've dated it precisely due to the ice cores now. Whether that's the result it seems to be because of they're not anecdotal accounts when they're all over the world and they're all consistent. And in Carlson's video, which is excellent in the material it covers, including the coincidences of the Chicago fire, quote, coincidences unquote, of the Chicago fire and various other ones around the Great Lakes, and the Great Fire of Halley's Comet in Montana and Idaho, and I'm sure in British Columbia and Alberta too. If I went to look at the records, so the whole idea of augury, of people who would look at the sky and forecast the future, it's very valid when you're dealing with comets. And they say, oh, there's a comet in the sky. There's going to be some plagues. There's going to be some war. There's going to be wars because of the deprivations. There'll be fires. There'll be floods. So, anyways, yeah, I'd never heard Plato's account before. It read like it was, right? I hadn't paid attention. When you're in classics, it's all kind of dismissed. Atlantis and Plato's account of it, and also things like Herodotus' account of the labyrinths of Egypt, which we have to take Herodotus at his word, that he's dealing with Egypt, which is the superior culture. He's not going to lie about it. The same with Plato. He's recounting a story told him, and that they've all learned at some point, and I'm sure all the rest of them knew it. Plato, Pythagoras, Heraclitus, all the rest of the philosophers, and all it was part of the culture of the time, right? Which is why the poem he cites from 1697 by Millinus, I think it was, which is a graphic description of a visit of a comet in the ancient times, and it's like it is named as the son of Apollo coming between the earth and the moon and heading into the north, which got warm, and the seas came up, and the Greenland turned to desert, and the seas rose. It's all in the account directly. I'd never heard it before. And I'm a classicist, and you always read, and you read all about Greek tragedy and all the dealings with the mind and stuff. That's all part of, the classical humanities tradition, especially since Nietzsche, you know. But the actual account, and I'm familiar with Voluspa, which is the Norse account of the apocalypse, which I see now as a memory, an account both of the 57 541 AD comet, but also looking back at the more ancient myths of the Norse and Celt, what little we know of them, thanks to the extermination of the truth about them by the Romans and Charlemagne. But that be aside, that we have this other various accounts of devastations of the earth, right? And we've always assumed that everything that was of the earth is our own fault or the earth's fault, or we blame it on the climate without thinking that the heavens actually are part of our lives. And astrology, well, when this comet comes down into the sky out of Scorpio, yeah, and that's apparently where the Phaeton comet comes. The Hiawatha impact, I'd like people to start calling it the Phaeton comet. This was Phoebus Apollo's son. As a classicist, when I heard that his sisters, the Eliades, meaning Phaeton sisters, which were the daughters of Apollo, who were the maenads of the poplars and Greenland, and then the seas rose, and when they subsided, much was gone, and the climate was changed, and all the land was changed, and the golden age was lost. And now, because this is Plato's account leading into the destruction of Atlantis, it gives a date for Atlantis now that Atlantis exists, that wherever it was, and it's said to have caused destruction also. I don't know. I'll have to reread Timaeus again, though. And really have a hard look at it. And I want everybody to do a look at Herodotus and read it really clearly. And somebody start learning ancient Greek and head for essence and start translating the library of the school of Epicurus and find out what else is in there. What other accounts there are. That ancient history lies locked in things we found, but we have no scholars enough to do it. Now, I'm speaking as a classicist. I'm somebody who's schooled in the humanities, and not as much as I'd like to be. I wish I could read Greek, and I wish I could, get my Latin better. And my Greek, if anything, is probably better than my Latin, and neither one's any good. But I'm also Nordic classics too. The Eddas and Germanics, Celtics, and all that. The Northern classics, and global classics. I've opened my mind, all of my soul to since I was young. And all of Hindu physics is all the same. And Hindu history has all the same stuff that Plato has, and same with Chinese history. And you go back anywhere, and I don't know, I'm going to have to ask my First Nations and Native American friends, what's in your lore that coincides with this timeline? But so much of their oral history was destroyed by the great devastation that we caused and we put upon them, both in Canada and in the United States. And right now is going on in Canada, but this is not a political video. Look at my other political videos, please, if you're not familiar with what's going on in Canada today, January 12th. That's of 1919. 20, how you must say, you must talk like in the 20th century, because that's when I was born in, you see. Anyways, I'm a creature from the past. I'm experiencing major future shock. But I'm also experiencing history shock, sort of. That everything we thought we knew, because of different revelations, including like the stories that Mr. Carlson tells, fit into place for me. And he's wrong about being the Hiawatha and all the other comets he names, they didn't land here. The Phaeton did. It says right so in the account in Plato, right? And it's in the north. And of course, it's the Hiawatha. It's 12,800 BC. So Plato had said 10,000 years before. Okay, give or take 2,000 years, but that 2,000 years was a great dark age, a great dark age, much greater than the one we experienced between the ancient world and the evil world. Oh, was it ever? It was nasty. Read the account in Plato, it's frightening, and this is what happens when a meteor hits an ice cap. Lucky it only hit the ice cap, and it hit stone underneath it, instead of hitting the sea. You see? But it turns out, from all the Velikovsky and stuff that I've been watching, let's not call it that, because I've been calling it planetary electrics. The planetary dynamics, and all your body is all electrics. This is the sort of, Tesla was on about this, Reich was on about this, everybody was on about this. Reich had other things going on too, but I mean, it even goes back to Mesmer even, that everything is biodynamic and electric, and medicine is electric. There's cancer cures that involve regenerating. They experimented on salamanders and rabbits and got them to regrow, and by stimulating the myelin sheath on the axon, all by stellate state properties. So ice caps and sea and land are solid state prop fields. I don't know enough about transistors and capacitors, but I've seen some technical videos on this. I understand some of electrical theory, and it's all very convincing. I got to send this to some of my older electrician friends and have them just listen, and it's like, okay, well, in this case, the Hiawatha impact, the story about the comet coming through in the Velikovskian account, which is the Phaeton comet that caused the Hiawatha impact and now is the Hiawatha meteorite, or that collection of meteorites. But I think it was an ongoing storm of fire. The tail kept on coming, and it kept on melting the ice cap that it had hit. But it was also interplanetary electric discharge, or by the comet. The comet itself was, according to Velikovsky, was an expulsion, by Saturn, I think it was, and Saturn used to be closer, and they all used to be closer. And every so many thousand years, the planets will come together as this, all that comes, their orbits come into sync, they all exchange electricity and go back out. Because this happened 12,800 years ago. Now, the ongoing melting of the Missoula floods, which Carlson talks about, as just being a small scale of the 10 billion cubic miles of ice. How much energy did it take to melt that? Well, there's only one place that can come from, and it's called outer space. Is it coming in as only a comet, or is it coming in also as an electrical discharge? Is it coming in attracted to the magnetic pole? Is it attracted by some sort of magnetic field guidance? So there's all kinds of ideas about electrical and magnetic stuff that intersects with what they're finding out about superconductivity and anti-gravity and all that stuff that the Russians are studying while the Americans are studying is a Bible. Look at all that brain power in America going to waste on nonsense. Is it any wonder their empire is ending? Anyways, I'm speaking as a Canadian who sits looking at them 16 miles that way. I'm pointing down south to me. Anyways, back to ancient history. Carlson's video is very interesting, had all kinds of things that I hadn't thought of, but, he mentions that poem that he account. Now, the thing about that Millennius poem, or Millennius, I think the name is, Millennius, I don't know where he's from. It was in English. Very nicely rhymed according to that period of tradition, 1697. This is there was a huge surge in Neoplatonism during the Renaissance, and all through the Baroque period that everybody knew astrology and alchemy. You name any of the writers and poets. Writers, no, they're poets, Shakespeare's a poet. They're all poets. There's very few historians in that era of the kind that we think of as historians in English, and anyways, even if he had somebody read from Revelations during the video, and it was like, yeah, it was kind of saying all the same thing, It's all a memory. Same with Voluspa, and same with what's in the Animal Lish and the Mahabharata. The destruction of the great cities that went under the sea, Dwarka being one of them. And the drowning of the great basin of the Black Sea. Where was Arata? Well, where was the Great Valley to the north? Yeah. Before 6000 BC, there was a great valley to the north that must have had human civilization in great number down on its fertile bottom around it was a Dead Sea, and it wouldn't have had, it was, like the Dead Sea, it would have been draining a much larger area, but it had only existed since 20,000 BC, so it might have been still fairly fresh. Right, 20,000 BC, the ice was locked up and the sea level was even lower. So when they want to look for all the missing links in human, where's the bridge between the Paleolithic and the Neolithic? Down there, under the sea. That's where it is. And also reading the literal accounts of the age, as they say, told by our ancestors. I'm speaking very sincerely here. I'm trying to look at you really sincerely without being really scary. Okay, I don't mean to be scary, right? Because these are true stories they're told, and we've been discrediting them because of both religious bias by Christianity and then anti-religious bias by the age of reason. We are now in the age of unreason, as we all know. Take one look at politics in almost any country. Every country, except for maybe a sane few. I don't know, there's one or two out there like Bhutan, but even there, no royalty. But even royalty has a reason. And in the ancient days, the royalty, Plato has a lot to say about what government is too, Anyways, let's not get into that here. But I'd never heard his account before. I'd never heard that poem from the 17th century before either. And there's a time of, Giordano Bruno was burned by the church for being like I would say probably he was a naturist, quasi-pagan Catholic philosopher. He was burned at the stake, the last great conflagration of the auto da fe of the Italian Inquisition by Savonarola in the Great Square in Florence. The Giordano Bruno, one of the great Italian thinkers, and all his writings were burned. You see, and this happened, of course, in the reign of Emperor Theodosius. But anyways. All these fires and comets of history, and he mentions the 537 comet. I thought it was. He suggests it was a comet, and there is a cinder layer around the planet, and they haven't been able maybe to date it to Krakatoa, but the theory is it was a Krakatoa explosion that made Sumatra and Java into two islands. It was heard in China. Things repercussions around the world. It darkened the world for 4 or 5 years. It was the Dark Age. It was the dawn of the Dark Age, I guess you could say. And when the dawn came, the world was in chaos, and all things happened. I talk about in some other historical videos, including, the persecution of the pagans of Germania came within a century after. There were all kinds of plagues, the Great Plague of Justinian. There were plagues in China. There was a yellow rain. So in 12,800, the rain came in blood, same as it did in Thera. But when Thera erupted, that happens in the atmosphere when great amounts of a material get thrown up into it. All kinds of things come down, right? Or the storms can sweep up everything, fish, frogs, everything, and come it ringing down from the sky. It's all, and then electrics also explains things like crop circles. I saw a thing on a relationship between ionosphere and the surface, right? And it can cause these relationships. You gotta remember there's this mantle, this belief that's this highly electric. We're all iron and nickel, they think. Anyway, that's not, I don't think the Velikovskian theory. That's a whole other story. But everything we thought we knew is not true. And this applies to our own history. Our history begins in 12,800, as Plato tells us it does. And the Egyptian records even go back to 200,000. So do the Babylonian records. Berossus, I thought, only goes back to 100,000, but I didn't ever have a chance to read that book I had from Bond's books for a while, which was published by the Masons, which is the secret history of Berossus. So, brother Masons, I'm not one of you, but I implore you to release Berossus to the public in its entirety, not just the little bit that you allow on Wikipedia that starts at Egypt and Sumer. There's so much more, and you know it. Anyway, we found out a lot of it now, right? So what's down there? Why did Thrace suddenly appear as a civilization right after 6,000? Why did Giraffe fade as a civilization? And what's under the Persian Gulf? What's under the Arabian Sea? What's under the Gulf of Cambrai other than Dwarka? What's on the banks of the Saraswati? What is on the banks of the Nile? That we don't know. What's on the lower delta of the Nile that would have been there before the 6,000 rise of 200 meters and the 12,800 rise of 125 meters and the 20,000 rise. These are all before Christ, 20,000 BC, 20,000 BC rise. I'm not sure by how many feet now, but I'm just putting putting an estimate, a total of, let's call it 550 meters. Okay, so that's 1,500 feet. Okay, we can't get down there too easily, right? We can have robots down, but where do we look? Well, we got to think about the geography all the time, and we got to use satellite technology to try and penetrate the surface bottom of the oceans, can we do that? I'm sure NASA can do that, and I'm sure the Russians can do it. I'm sure the Chinese can do it. So there's all kinds of things all through Central Asia that, of course, we're all above this. Some of it was under ice, but a lot of Central Asia wasn't, and a lot of the tropics wasn't. And there's all these stories from Tiwanaku, about how old it is, 10,000 years again, and there's Tel Carmel. I'm speaking as a classicist, not as like a vlogger on the Alien channel, and I respect Andrew Carlson and Graham Hancock, and I think we got to stop looking for aliens and just realize that the greater ages of us, the golden age of all our legends planet-wide, when everything was peaceful and we were good people, I guess you could say, but different and better. The golden age is all below the seas, other than the fragments of it that stand yet above the land. And now the seas are going to rise again, my friends. I'm not being a gloom and doomer. I just know my science. So I've been watching this unfold my whole life since I was young. I've known it going on since I was young, and nobody would believe me. But that's the thing about Apollo. You see, Apollo is the sun, and Apollo sent a lightning bolt to destroy Phaeton. That's what it says in the story, right? And Phaeton fell plunging to earth and landed in the river Eridanus. And Carlson doesn't make the connection that I did. And my classical education is not what I wish it was, but Eridanus is the river that circles the world, which would be, the Arctic Ocean, the Atlantic, the Southern Ocean, the Indian, and the Pacific Ocean all combined is the river Eridanus. It landed in the northern part of Eridanus in the north. It warmed the north. It caused great fires and devastations, and everything else it says in Plato. We now know that the Timaeus is historical fact, and it dates to 12,800. Plato said 10,000 years before, and he's off by a couple of thousand. But again, there was this ancient dark age, and it was only like the time of Gobekli Tepe and Tel Harmoka and Tel Carmel 10,000 years ago that civilization rose again. Not civilization as we thought we knew it, with cities and agriculture and temples and priesthoods. No, no, no. These were people trying to reckon with the stars as to what had happened in the skies. This is why Göbekli Tepe was built. But that area would have been survivors of the cities, it appears, according to stories go, that lay between Cyprus and along the Levant and over to Syria and up to Turkey. That whole area must have been populated heavily. Same with the Nile Delta, the lower Nile Delta at those lower elevations. Please send down magnetometers to those depths and find out, or whatever you do to find out if there's solid structures down there. I think there's a whole new age of history waiting for classicists to discover, and historians and archaeologists. But how do we do it? It's under the sea. So all this time we've been looking to outer space for explanations and also places to get out of what we've done. But in Plato, it also, that people went underground to survive. And it's not just Derinkuyu, the famous underground city in Cappadocia in Turkey. There's other places where there's underground cities, or places to go, which was under Crete, those amazing catacombs, which to me are the catacombs of the Minotaur, not Knossos. Knossos was the palace, you know. And anyway, I won't get into all that, but those catacombs on Crete, there's all through Italy, there's caves and catacombs, France, England, there's places to hide underground. Except England was under ice at the time. And there was a great wave when the Hiawatha impact hit of the Phaeton comet. I'm going to call it that from now on. The Phaeton comet, right? This was the great Phaeton comet of legend that cataclysmed the world and dates Atlantis for us. Unless I'm mistaken, and this when Phaeton came down is not. I have to read the Timaeus again. I didn't finish. They didn't finish the whole story, but it seemed to me that he was associating with the destruction of Atlantis, which I always thought was because they built some crystal and something like that. But the seven circular cities, the most logical site I can see for that myself is that site that I've seen of all the stuff I've seen on the possible Atlantis sites. The only one that fits the description and would have had a huge marine circular harbor. Like, guess what other city did? Carthage. Except Atlantis had a circle of 7 harbors, and it was on islands and rings, and it was this huge circular formation, and they built a city in the middle of it. And it had all these mysterious abilities and powers and all the stuff that Plato says it did, right? Wherever all the legends acquired about it, because in the 17th century, that poem is just repeating stuff. I mentioned Giordano Bruno and all the Neoplatonists in that era. I'm sorry I get distracted. But that was all because all the gentlemen of that area still knew all the Hermetic stuff, the alchemical lore, the Hermetic stuff, the alchemists. All those poets knew astrology. They knew when you read a poem from the Elizabethan or Jacobean era and all that era until the Age of Reason and into the Romantic era, when they're mentioning the gods and the spirits and stuff, they're talking about memories. They knew this stuff was things that have since been destroyed by the Reformation and the Counter-Reformation. Christianity destroyed far more than Rome did of our ancient history, because the medievals and the Renaissance people knew all of it still. Now it's been persecuted out of existence, only protected by my brother Masons. I'm just a scholar. That's how I address them. I'm a scholar of the world. And anyways, it seems that all the ancient myths are true. All the ancient myths are true. We just didn't want to take them at face value. And they can all be, I think we can probably date them in the Mahabharata too, and whatever the Chinese accounts are, and so on. And the Missoula floods fit right in. And where did the Fraser ice cap go? And where was it anyway? Because it didn't come down the Fraser Canyon the same way that where the ice flow that came down Georgia Strait and the Puget Sound came from down Georgia Strait. So you see the whole geology that my friend Nick sent there for huge floods has. He hasn't. Their American side geography. They don't know the Canadian side, and I don't know if the Canadian side guys are even aware of all this stuff. National Research Council. I don't know. I should send this to them because I'm a classicist who also knows our geological history, and I know the geographical and environmental history of North America and the New World and the Old World. And I've read all kinds of history. And I just keep on reading more and hearing more. Now that I've heard all this about, I'd read Velikovsky when I was young, but I didn't understand enough theory to even give it a half a moment's credence. And of course, it was considered popular weirdo fiction by a crazy Russian, But no, he was a colleague of Einstein's. I don't know if he knew Tesla. I hope he did. One, that would have been an interesting conversation. But I'm a fan of the ancient Greek philosopher Heraclitus. Everything is fire. Fire is the lightning. Zeus is the lightning. Zeus is your mind also. It's the fire in your mind. We are fire. We are born from fire. Fire drives the heavens. And so astrology does have a basis, oddly enough, especially when the planets are close. Yeah, of course it would affect your mood when the world's going into chaos. So people trying to cope with this came up with this attempt to build systems of understanding. So at Göbekli Tepe, which is, I would just say, part of the Haran complex, the Upper Chaldean complex, I'm going to call it. Chaldea is all of the Asiatic part of the Fertile Crescent. Egypt is the African part. There appears to be a Central Asian part, but I can't get into that right now. And anyways, and, in East Asia it's different. The Mekong appears about 10,000 after the rising of the seas after the Phaeton comet. And again, they must have relocated. The people of Asia, they relocated at 6,000 BC, and then the Mekong, the rice that they find in the Mekong is 10,000 years old. Rice cultivation. So where'd that come from? Well, down below. Anyway, so maybe agriculture is older than we knew, but there was temple building without agriculture. The people who built Göbekli Tepe were people who did it out of their own effort, but then maybe, that they were given the time 10,500. This is, let me think, 10,800. What is that? 1,300 years later. I'm sorry, I can't do the numbers quickly. Uh, these are people who fled the drowning of the great lands of human civilization that lay underneath the Mediterranean where the waters are now, and also those who fled the Black Sea, who maybe built Nushun, that place in Nunshu or whatever it is, that place in Ukraine, and that seemed to have built the survivors of it built the Thracian civilization. Had the same, but also after the rising of the 6,000 BC thing. But Göbekli Tepe, these are the star cults that began there. Haran is dated from only 500 years later, and there's other things near Göbekli Tepe that are similar. Now I find out about Tel Carmel and so on. I wish Dick Sullivan was still alive. He was my first humanities prof. To discuss this with, and the one classicist I know, he's an arch Catholic. I won't get into it. He doesn't like the alternative histories and all. I haven't talked to him in years. He was my classics prof, my ancient Greek prof at SFU, private seminar with him. Anyways, the Phoenicians, and you hear about the Philistines, right? Palestine, right? But it's that coast, the Levant, and up into, it was called Armenia in ancient times for a while anyway, and Sabia. This was the area that was spared by both Christians, I hope by the Christians. I don't know about during the Iconoclast heresy, what got destroyed, but I think they're pretty clever at surviving. They didn't survive the Mongols. Hopefully, the great library of Hermes that lies beneath the temple of the seven planets did, but nobody's ever dug there. Maybe it's political; it can't be dug. It could be, like you can't do certain digs in Greece because of the Orthodox Church. This is still the way. The church still has a ban on our history. The Vatican still holds things. The Vatican's in complete denial. And I kind of wonder, now it just occurred to me, the Portuguese bishop, excuse me, the Portuguese bishop of Goa, when he burned all the records of the churches of St. Thomas in India that he'd called together from once he heard about the existence of the church and sent out word, bring them all to Goa, I want to see them. He had a look. And he said he burned them all in a huge pyre of flame because they were works of the devil. And they might have contained stories of Jesus in Kashmir, who was said to be at Brahmaputran and also at Jagannath and other Nalanda and the other great Asian universities that were much alive during Roman times, when Roman had a lock on the ancient mind and proclaimed itself the greatest thing that had ever lived and destroyed all memory of anything before it. Oh yeah, okay. And then the Catholic Church did even more. Okay, so our ancient history is being unwrapped. If we just take the surviving bits that are there, and Plato is one of them, the Egyptian annals are one of them. The Colburn, I believe, is valid, absolutely valid. The Enoch has to be read with a certain grain of salt, and I believe that the monsters that were born from the Son of Heavens, from the heavens, of siren, from everything from fish to dogs to us. You know, the great beasts of the Hiawatha impact, pre-Phaeton comet era, before the seas rose, but also, the saber-toothed, the mammals, the mastodons, the giant bears, all those big critters, that disappeared. That maybe they were smarter than they knew, and they were intelligent, and that's why they were attributed as having been born of heaven, therefore intelligent. Right? So this raises questions for, we do have a Sasquatch Protection Act in British Columbia, and I'm glad of that now, because vast areas of habitat for the great ancient beings of the forest who must exist, from what I know of ancient history, but also the vastness of this country I'm in, and how much of it's been logged, and how much of it you can't get into because the forest industry only had access to it. Anyway, we have a Sasquatch Protection Act now, and they're the sons of the earth and sky. They're probably longer lived than we are. Now that's crazy talk, I know, but all this is crazy talk. But the crazy talk is more and more and more sensible. And this is what I was saying about generalists. The people in their specialist disciplines, they can't think outside their boxes. I watch the NASA Goddard videos on Hiawatha, and they don't come quite the same conclusions yet, because they don't have enough classicists on board, people who know ancient history and mythography. Now, I'm not asking to be hired anymore. I'm a Canadian. I can't go there. I can do what I do from anywhere, which I'm going to keep doing. But this is all really fascinating stuff, and the role of planetary electrics, as I'm calling it, the Velikovsky and Tesla Heraclitean theory, you know, uh, that nature is a Heraclitean fire. It's a line from Gerald Manley Hopkins. The poets know so much by innate knowledge. Same with Blake. Same with Shakespeare. There are more things on heaven and earth than the sky, Horatio. You don't have to read between the lines. They say it straight out when they recount the ancient myths, and the Romans too. The Ovid. And read your Hesiod. Even when Pindar, or as you using in the Olympian poems, they'll talk about things like Phaeton on his chariot, plunging into the sky, and then there's the story of Icarus and all this stuff. It's all literal. And we totally underestimate the ancient world, because we were destroyed in 537, almost destroyed again, 537, 541 AD. Whether it was the Krakatoa, Proto-Krakatoa volcano, I call it Surtur, that's the great king of the fire demons, of the fire giants, rather, in Norse myth, that sundered Sumatra and Java into two, and is still active after all these years. Still crazy after all these years. Or Carlson suggesting it was another comet. Now, I don't know if there's any cometary data for that period. There was no impact, or there would have been a further cataclysm like there was well, we didn't have any more ice to melt. We didn't if it hit the ice, we would have, but there was no oceanic impact. Maybe there was a land impact, but there seems to be volcanic evidence and isotopic evidence that it's volcanic, as opposed to interplanetary. But a planetary impact would still send up terrestrial material, and it would come down. And then you have things like that bit of glass that they found in the southwest Egyptian desert. And the archaeology that needs to be done in Egypt lies beneath its sands. And they already have politics in Islam about. I'm taking my hair out because I don't like to tie in at this time of day. It opens my mind up to have it out. Don't mind me. Underneath the desert in Hawara, there's not just Hawara, there's the story of the Great Labyrinth. And I think the Vatican probably knows. I'm waiting for the Canadian Pacific train to live by. I'll also be living next to the same line. It'll be on the other side of the canyon in 2 weeks, but I'll be there, and then the CNR on my side of the city of the canyon. So I'll have two more trains than this. But it becomes part of your life when you live along the thin, long white line that is the Trans-Canada Corridor. Anyways, which is where all the white people live. And north of here is mostly red, other than the colonists. Anyways, I won't go into all that. Anyways, I'm talking about these ancient dates, that the Hiawatha impact dates a lot of things, and it caused a lot of things, including like a great age of terror and darkness. So the the Krakatoa event, let's call it that. No, not the Krakatoa event, the 537. Let's just call it the Great Years of Darkness is the term I've been using, 537 to 541, which I believe was the Fimbulvitr spoken of in the Voluspo of the Eldoretta. That it's a memory. And they know that before that happened, before the great years of darkness, that Tyr was the primary cult of the North, and of course Germania was the primary home of the Germanic peoples, including my own province of Norway on my grandma's side, from Rueland, the Rugians, who came from somewhere down south on the South Rhine. They moved to Norway, and when did they move to Norway? Well, this would be after the rising of the seas, after the destruction of the land that lay between England and Denmark, that's now known as Doggerland, which I believe, I don't know, maybe it's Lyonesse or Avalon. Oh, there are many cities said to have sunken beneath the sea other than Atlantis. So we sort of have, by listening to what I heard on Randall Carlson's video about Plato just now, it seems that we have a classicist, his humanities, of a man we highly respect, Plato, don't we? Huh? This is his account of something he considers to be true, as told to him by the Egyptians whose culture was superior to his own. All his fellow Greeks would have known it, or well, we don't have any people criticizing him, but it meant so much. Only him and Aristotle have survived, and Socrates thereby. And a few other things and fragments and scraps, other than the great library of Epicurus, which, please, people, somebody, again, I'll say it again, please learn ancient Greek and go to Athens and start asking to be able to study that and translate it and look for these. Look for the lost philosophers. Look for the lost plays, right? Look for the lost books that we don't even know about. Look for Heraclitus especially, though, and Parmenides. Look for the whole corpus of literature that the Christians burned. Or the Romans did too, when they burned the Great Library of Corinth. They burned the Great Library of Carthage, which was 1,000 years older than their own city, and was founded by people fleeing. Yes, in 1200 BC, they were fleeing the devastation of the Eastern European because of the Thera eruption, which would have also sent a huge tsunami into the Haran, Upper Chaldean region. Also northern Cyprus, which was the home of Aphrodite, Venus, the cult of the morning star, of the comet, the daughter of the comet. This was a great temple to her, Cyprus, the whole of Cyprus. And between there and the valley of I don't know the river there, that is there between Syria and Turkey, not between Syria and Turkey, but along that frontier there, the valley that goes up there, where Edessa was, and Antalya is, and Balyurfa is, and the Haran area, Upper Chaldea, includes Lebanon somewhat. The Punic culture is directly connected to the Haran, the cult of the stars. Obviously, they were star travelers. These were men who built ships that they could travel the seas. They knew how to build ships really well, and they used the cedars of Lebanon to sail the world. Now, when the devastation hit of the great wave that would have hit and destroyed their area in 1700, according to the one video I've been seeing lately about the dating of it, 1700, that there was this massive, the eruption of Thera would have caused a tsunami all through the Mediterranean and swept up that area. So anyways, Tyre, Sidon, all of them would have been wasted for a while. And so they had Carthage as a port, and it became their primary city, and Carthage became a great city 1,000 years before Rome. And Rome burned it and destroyed it and plowed it into the ground and claimed a lot of their technology as their own, like the ships. And Etruscan technology is their own also. Romans are a pirate culture, and we're a pirate culture to this day. We're acquire other knowledge and move on. Americans did that all the time. They became a monstrosity. So did the British, so did the French, so did everybody, Russians, everybody has their shot at being assholes in the planetary politics, okay? You think they're going to let us off when we don't get past this point? It's not about getting off the planet. It's about harnessing the planet and understanding the electrics of it and of our own bodies. It's such a huge issue. I'm going to post this to a philosophy group I'm in, because it's a metaphysical issue. Including our knowledge of the past has now been shaken once again, the same way it was by Newton and by Darwin. I don't know who to credit, actually. The Australian gentleman, Will, I'm sorry, I keep on forgetting his last name. I don't want to say it wrong again. the the electrics, planetary electrics, Velikovsky materials. Or the other gentleman from Toronto on that who first looked at the age, everything. But everybody who's been looking at the ancient records and guessing at why, and the ancient aliens and all this visitors from outer space, maybe, I don't know, But why I think we had other civilizations that are now lost. And yeah, but never going. Let's go back 20,000 years. There's more. There was a massive ice cap. All the water down to about, I don't know, 550 meters, maybe more. I don't know that original line below 20,000. There was a certain maximum extent when how much land was down there. And you got to remember, humanity, we barely survived each of these cataclysms. Somehow we survived on the high land and where we know we were, with what we are now called the continents, but this was all the mountains. And in Plato, it says straight out that, mountains became islands. It says straight out, okay, so people, Plato's account in the Timaeus, and I'm addressing this to my people in classics who are out there, and in philosophy and history, and geology and archaeology. Plato's account is now a literal account of the cataclysm of 12,800, and gives a mythical account also of a lightning bolt in the sky that hit the meteor, some kind of electrical discharge from somewhere, right? Maybe the moon, but no, the moon watched in horror as it passed between her and the earth. Her brother, Artemis, the moon, the virgin huntress. Diana, whose temple was at Ephesus, where I want to go play my music. She watched her brother fall and plunge into the earth in the river Eridanus, which circles the world. In the Arctic Ocean on the shore of Greenland. And there was a great wave and a great fire and great horrors. And it took 2,000 years for humanity to rise out of the ashes. No, 1,300. I tried to do the date there. 10,000, 11,000. 2,800 years for humanity. 2,800 years it took for humanity to build Göbekli Tepe. And there's older things probably than Göbekli Tepe. That's just the first one we found in that area. Upper Chaldea. Now, also underneath the Persian Gulf, of course. Dilmun is down there. Just hasn't been excavated. They found it. The War Canal now, 200 meters down. I know archaeology, that depth gets difficult. And deeper, but, you can do a lot with bots, right? But, it's said that in the end times, all things shall be revealed. Yeah, well, it's amazing what we're finding out. Let me put it that way. But history is probably the most revolutionary field going on right now. And, I am younger still at heart. I don't know if I'll find the resources and the wherewithal to get myself out and not see these places, but be dedicated to working, studying at it. And it's my living, it'd be great, but I'm just, as a historian and a classicist and somebody who loves history and knows his classics, knows a comprehensive kind of global classics and global, thanks partly to an education from YouTube, but also years and years and years upon readings, and also watching current politics and journalistic interpretations of the past and their various lies and distortions and mistakes, and the mistakes taken from Gibbon, that the excesses of the Claudian dynasty caused the fall of Rome. Oh, really? No, that was Christianity, sir. I should take that back. Because it was the Ottomans who caused the fall of Rome eventually. But that was New Rome. But yeah, Rome, by obliterating the past of all the peoples it absorbed, it destroyed the legacy of humankind that came before it. It was a tsunami of human ignorance. So was the Catholic Church. So was, the really hardcore Islam like the Taliban. And they did this in ancient times too. The iconoclasty in the Byzantine world. The iconoclasty destroyed many things of great beauty, including classical statues, all over the place. The great shrine of Delos was desecrated. I won't get into the shrines to Dionysus there, but I've been there and they're shattered. They're broken. Yeah, they were broken by earthquakes also, but Olympus was hit by an earthquake and a flood, and the great statue was taken to Constantinople, where it was burned by a Venetian mob who thought it was gesturing. Oh no, by a Constantinopolitan mob who thought that it was gesturing the Venetians to enter the city, and they did. And so they tore down the great ivory and gold statue of Zeus that had stood at Olympia. Was one of the wonders of the ancient world. Where's the Athenians? Probably got destroyed. So we have the pyramids left, and they remain that great mystery they are. And I watched this interesting thing about, yeah, you know, it was really interesting about the things I found out about the Sphinx, and it occurred to me about the dating of the watering of the Sphinx too. Let's put it call it that way, in 10,100. So there's these huge rains, right? When the Earth changed, the climate changed, ice caps, and in the tropics there would have been rains. And you know, this was then when the savanna started to turn. Also, when the seas came up in 6,000, when the savanna that is the Sahara and Arabia, as it says in Plato and in the Egyptian accounts and in all the other accounts like the Colburn, you know, everything I've seen, you know, it says and the grasslands became sand, you know, and the forests were burned and so on. And oh, there's so much in ancient history that science is discounted in its pursuit of the stars and the vanities of mathematics. The vanities of the Newtonian world is interesting to watch it being shattered by the Velikovsky and I would also put slash Teslan for relevant revelations and for the convenience of the classical world people, the Heraclitean fire that drives the universe and drives our bodies and our souls and time itself and cannot be reversed and will come again. And if I'm right about what Plato says about harmonics in his studies on music, you know, and my understanding of what he said about the harmony of the spheres, I'm gonna have to go reread that passage too, because you know resonance is there's this harmonic that if the meteor in which was certainly a meteor, but may have also had to do with electrical activity from the comet being drawn by the ice cap, but also expelled by somewhere else due to the planets being closer, as legend indicates they are, and that Saturn was the principal sun in the sky. Anyways, there's a whole interesting stuff on what Saturn, maybe the brown dwarf that was captured and stuff like that. And Venus is a comet, you know, that was the comet that is now, you know, her morning star straight the world and spread great plagues and fires and devastation. And that's why great temples are built to Ishtar and Tanit. Tanit is the circle, the Punic circle. You know, they didn't, all these videos don't get this because they don't know Punic civilization after the ones I've been watching. The circle with the star in it, with the 8-pointed star in it, that's the symbol of Tanit, the great goddess of the Punics, whose symbol is all over the remains of the remaining Carthaginian graveyards, you know, and whatever else it remains, and all through the Punic world. So was this when Baalbek went down? I don't know. You know, I don't know all that stuff. I don't want to time all that right here because it's too complex. But yeah, we have Göbekli Tepe, and Göbekli Tepe's, I would say there's probably a stellar arrangement, but it features all the signs of what were probably the zodiac at the time. But the zodiac at the time, Carlson misses this when he says that the comet came out of Scorpio, which is what Plato says. If you take the meaning of it, talking about Scorpio and the tale is being told, or maybe that's in the poem by Millennius. But coming out of Scorpio, which is like an astrological thing, of course, has associations of all kinds. But that Scorpio at that time, the ecliptic was different, and as we know now, like our current astrological charts are different than they were in ancient times. And I think ours are from Babylonia, from 3,500, in terms of where we are lined, where we like when Libra becomes Scorpio, when Scorpio becomes Sagittarius, that date, what part of the sky is actually covered by the ecliptic during those dates is different. And when it's in different constellations, the whale, I think it is, Ophiuchus, is now in the zodiac. But the planetary zodiac in 10,500 would have been different. And the ecliptic. And that he talks about, he mentions the declination of the skies, and he's thinking of coming from the declination, he's thinking of the descent of the meteor. No. He's talking about the declination of the planet. That's what Plato was meaning, you know. Anyway, so I'm a generalist, obviously, right? I'm a classicist. I studied astronomy since I was a kid. Chemistry, I understand. Nuclear physics, I understand. Organic physics, organic chemistry for the physics of organic chemistry, the physics of the brain, whether or not the brain is, whether the soul is a reflection of the brain or the brain is a manifestation of the soul, which is suggested by bioelectrics, that something programs us with our DNA, you know, something which is also an electrical pattern, to make this little bit of us turn into this, you know, and to discover and think like this, right? So we're a part of a self-aware part of existence, right? So it's electricity itself is alive. which now I'm kind of looking at our planetary weather problems really differently. It's all one, you know. We have to look at it as all one because it's only a really holistic solution that's going to save this planet. So consider the electrical theory in terms of the great fires. And like now it's a January day, it's well above zero. I'm sitting in the hot sun, although I do have to dress for it. It's chilly still. But the sun is hot, you know, and this is January in British Columbia. Now, we often have these winters here, but we had these terrible fires, you know, and you had these monstrous fires in Paradise in Malibu, California. Monstrous. And behaving differently than any fire before them, even the Mendocino Complex fire. And we didn't have choppers up in the air all over the Tweedsmuir Complex fire. We don't have that kind of news networks, the USU, and news coverage. We just don't. So the vast, vast, vast South Tweedsmuir Complex fire, which was 3 times as large as the Mendocino Complex, didn't have anything like what appeared in the Malibu and Paradise fires. New stage of fire, new type of fire. I was commenting on earlier videos about, you know, about environmental change, that we are now facing a new stage of history, right? Well, what it is also that the new revelations about electric suggest to me that the behavior of those fires is because of the electrical nature of the discharge between the Pacific, the warm oceanic blob offshore from the Gulf of Alaska to the Gulf of California or to Baja California. However large it is now, it's gigantic. You know, it's warmer than the rest of the ocean, the rest of the Pacific, and it's kind of stable and static. And I remember when it started off Oregon, it was static, right? There's no fish in it. I mean, one of the reasons you want to know why the orcas are dying, people, it's a lot more than the logging and the shipping. It is a lot more. There's no more fish, and why aren't there any more fish? Because the North Pacific is dead. Sure, it was fished out, but now it's also warm. What, maybe did we fish it out and make that be warm? It could have been. So much fish was taken out of the living organism that was the North Pacific, of the Great Mother Sea, of Eridanus, the river that circles the world. So much was taken out, and out of the North Atlantic. You know, the bioplasm was taken out of the ocean and eaten by humans, and continues to be. So much was taken out. It must have an effect on the atmosphere and the climate, everything. You know, the temperature of the oceans. Anyways, the blob, because of all this stuff in planetary electrics that I'm understanding more and more now. It's a discharge between the fires are a manifest because of the hot, dry winds. Those are also a manifestation of the electrical discharge between land and sea, between the blob and the American West and the Canadian West. Well, the Canadian West, British Columbia, and Alberta. Enjoy the fires. You know, keep pumping that oil, boys. You want your kids to have a future, you better stop tomorrow, okay? You want your kids to have a future, you go learn a better industry to be working in. You can make lots of money in the new industries, buddies. Really, I'm trying to be friendly, but I hate what you're doing. I hate what the Canadian Yellow Vests are doing. But they just don't understand that their kids' future relies on them having the courage to learn a whole new industry, like the woman came and did during World War II, and came and took up the jobs of the men. You know, they took up the jobs of the men when the men had to go to war to do factories and make bullets and tanks and all that. The woman came in and manned the forces. And my mom was a meteorologist, you know. But women worked in World War II, which they largely hadn't in World War One. They did nurses and stuff, but they manned the factories in North America. So, you know, it can be done. You know, all these gentlemen in Alberta who want their pipeline built so they can have their well-paying jobs. Buddy, there's well-paying jobs in the new future. The new future is the one your kids have to have, and the only one who's going to do it is harness the power of this electricity, you know, and the thermal power of the earth itself, you know. So start your drilling, start your solar, all your training and all that stuff, drilling for geothermal, running solar, designing stuff, you know, designing your houses better, you know, and your kids already know all this stuff, pops and moms. And don't tell your kids lies. Don't send them to church. It's going to tell them lies and hide the history of the world from them. Send them to somewhere that teaches them science. Send them to somewhere that teaches them history, and send them to somewhere that teaches them about the history of human values, you know, both in the West and, you know, China, Lao Tzu, and the Upanishads, and also the great knowledge of the Hindu and East Asian civilizations, Southeast Asian, and the Middle East is part of the West, folks. I know that sounds strange, right? But it is. The Islamic world is part of the West. You know, it's part of the legacy of the people of the book. And it overtook the Persian Empire, which also had been overtaken by the West in the form of a certain gentleman named Alexander. Now, some of this stuff, the videos I'm watching, they try and go on about every event of the ancient world having to do with a comet, but with Thera, it's pretty obvious. We know some are volcanoes, but even the volcanoes like Thera, which was kind of a super volcano, uh, but maybe they were also electrical, because they're electrical storms caused by them, but maybe they're also to do with, discharges either between the atmosphere and the mantle, or what's under the mantle, what we think is the mantle. Velikovsky indicates other things, or that there's a separation between Earth and mantle. That's the premise of the 2012 movie. But anybody who tries to tie anything to a human calendar's prediction is wrong. The only calendars that work are the ones that happen. And what happened in 12,800, we saw it was 10,500 by what Plato said about it. No, it's 12,800. There's that gap of 10,500, though, that where Göbekli Tepe is, and Haran was founded, in Punic culture. I believe Punic civilization is a foundation of the ancient world more than Roman civilization was. And the Romanians say that their language is older than Latin. It was the language of the Dacians and of Troy, and of that whole part of Phrygia. And that Aeneas, of course, was from there, and then he settled in Italy, and that's when Latin arrived in Italy, was with Aeneas, and the story of Romulus and Remus and all that stuff. So the foundation of Rome is a spin-off of the destruction of Troy, which was in the wake of the Thera disaster. And anytime there's a huge disaster like that, there's huge wars and stuff. And given the dating of things, I don't know, the date of the Trojan War now, I'm thinking about that, the thing of the other dating of the thing I saw in Egypt, Oh, there's a lot of stuff here to be considered, that what was the Greeks, when Helen was taken, and they all sailed for Troy. It did happen, for sure. When was Thera again? You see what I'm thinking? That the Argolis was known to be destroyed when Thera erupted by a huge tsunami that destroyed everything but the citadel of Argos and the citadel of Mycenae and the sea walls of the great city of Tiryns, which had been founded by the walls had been built by the giants, who Ovid says in one part of something about the daughter of the king of Tiryns, that she used to throw stones at the walls and they would sing because the giants had sung them into place. So the use of acoustics for mass manipulation appears to have been the means of stone cutting in the ancient world, and maybe those acoustics were electroacoustics, which would explain the clear line cutting of excellent fitted stones and all this stuff, right? There's no definable measurement is the thing with all those megalithic works, but the ability to do what they did, including those hole drillings in pre-dynastic Egypt, where they have these really finely tuned little stone vases. You can't do that with drills today, even with lasers, to make a really beautiful little vase like that. Or you'd need lasers to do it, to culture and then make the inside scoop. How do you bend a laser? I don't know. How do you drill that? You can't. So they did this somehow, and the only way I can now see is that some kind of electrical field working the stone. And they said there's this soft stone technology. So I'm a classicist. I'm a rationalist. And I've decided to watch this stuff and say, okay, and I'm discounting all the religious and alien stuff that I'm hearing and the interpretations of the myths, like I say, of visitors from outside. Well, with these comments and what they say about the moon and what's indicated about, Mars having had something beforehand. See, before 12,800, Mars was different. Before Venus passed by and lashed her with a whip that is the Valles Marineris. So this is also Martian and Venetian classic. This is also the history of the solar system itself. So that's 12,800. Can we date that? Can we get to the Valles Marineris and date that? I think we're going to be really interested, really curious to find out what we find on Mars underneath its surface. I don't know. I'm not a crazy man, but you hear about the lights on the other side of the moon. The Chinese are going to land there soon. And if anybody on this planet can make diplomatic overtures to an external civilization, it's them. Quite frankly. They're the Ferengi of this planet, and they'll cut us a good trade deal and get them, they might even get us some technology. I don't know. That's a crazy talk again. It's crazy talk, but this is a crazy time. And all the sideshow of Mr. Putin and Mr. Trump and and Mr. Trudeau taking on the Indians. Oh, it's all a sideshow to what the world has in store for us. You see, because I've seen history now, and if Velikovsky is right, and Plato's theory of harmonics is right, and you know how a string resonates, you hit it, and it resonates a whole bunch of times, right? So you know how a string vibrates. You look at the sine wave of cosmos. You look at a string vibrate on a thing about a string vibrating. Planetary harmonics are like that, and 20,000 years ago, 12,800 years ago, and 6,000 years ago, the planets came together and had discharges of fire that melted the ice caps. Well, the ice caps melt again now because there's too many of us. So this time, those discharges of fire will probably hit the land surface, mostly at the poles, maybe. I'm just speculating. I don't know shit. I'm just speculating. I'm just wild guessing as somebody trying to guess, you know. But this time it won't melt ice. It'll kill people. But that's fine. There's too many good goddamn of us on the planet anyway. And I'm sure the masters of the world know that. And not so much the planetary stuff, although I'm sure they're finding out all this stuff and being advised on it also. They have good counselors, you know. But I'm sure they do. And of course, they've always had astrologers and augurers. You know, and augurers saw the sky and knew that comets were a sign of doom, you know, and a sign of great things happening and the rise of kings and the coming of plagues and wars and devastations. Yeah, and they are, right? And all through our history, our history has been written from the heavens. And a lot of it we don't have a choice in, no matter what we're doing to each other at the time. So who knows what was going on in the Mediterranean basin? Who knows the lost history of the world? Please, Masonry, please release process. And archaeologists get busy, kids get busy learning ancient Greek and Egyptian and learning all this stuff. And somebody go over to Colburn, who's a classicist, please, and just get aside all this babble that comes out about it. Just look at the material and go, okay. And now with the date of the Exodus being with the reign of Atmosis, which was in the Revelations of the Colburn, he doesn't mention him by name, but other indications are it's him. And the migration of the Hyksos, which is some of them were the Hebrews, some went to the Argolids, and built the beehive tombs, 1300. But at the Great Devastation, the people who hid underground, the ones on Crete were lucky because those caves on Crete, the great catacombs on Crete, that they're partly Nazi expanded and partly Greek resistance expanded in the Civil War. But there is vast ancient diggings also in the Caucasus. Also, it's said in the Himalayas, you know, where the Great Cave of Aladdin is said to be, where the Takht Suleiman, the throne of Suleiman, once a great capital of Greek Bactria, is. Classical temple, classical city on a mountaintop, once a great capital of Buddhist Greek Bactria. All our histories are interconnected, and they all have the same stories of the devastations of ancient times. The Hindus have the Yugas. Everybody has ages of the world: the Maya, the Hopi, you know, the various Native American tribes and First Nations people talk about having come up from underground. You know, and so on. You know, like we really need to have a really. I was speaking as an academic who doesn't have a degree. You know, it's trying to talk to academics to say, please have a listen. You know, and think about all this. You know, all this stuff that you haven't read because you were told it was nonsense. And I know I was told it to me. You know, we just passed over in class to class. We just mentioned that he'd said this, but there was no proof, and nobody knew what it was. And theory gets mentioned, but no, theory's not far back enough. Theory would have been in the great devastation out of which archaic Greece, out of which the Trojan War happened, and archaic Greece rose. Now, why there were Egyptians taking refuge at Mycenae in the Argolids, the beehive tombs, which is indicated by one of these proto-archaeological historical explorations I've been watching, about the Hyksos, so some of them went there, but the others were the Hebrews, you know. That where could it be? It could be that I'm not going to say the Dorians. I'm not sure who the ruling families of Argos and which group of Greeks they were from. The Argos and Mykonos and Tiryns, the Argolid, who was devastated by the tsunami. But I can see them taking refugees from it to rebuild their populations, and then the people brought their traditional burial practices. So it all ties together when you tie together like all your if people who've read really widely in classical history, including other cultures, and watch channels like Kings and Generals, as well as all the apocalyptic stuff about comets and aliens and all this stuff and the religious stuff. People trying to link it to the Bible. Okay, the Bible has valid stuff in it. It has also has a really really stupid religion in it. Stupid rules, stupid mentality in it. Because people were trying to cope with the post-traumatic stress disorder of the great devastations and the war in heavens they'd seen and the cruelties of mankind. Basically the killing Cain killing Abel is the story of the beginning of the killings within mankind after the garden was broken, and the garden was broken by an angel with a flaming sword, right? Okay, you see? So people look for Eden above land. But Eden is what emerged after the devastation. And as Gilgamesh found out, he journeyed to Dilmun, apparently before it was underwater. It's now an island. But Dilmun as a civilization, he journeyed to Dilmun, where Utnapishtim, who had survived the flood, 12,800, 6,000 BC, I'm sorry, he survived the flood, lived. And he said, no man can come back from the world of the dead. Well, Utnapishtim would have known because he'd lost everybody else he'd known. So this dates the story of Gilgamesh to 6,000 BC. It doesn't explain to me why the emblem of the hero holding the two lions, which is the Gilgamesh emblem, are usually taken as, is on Giraffe, which is dated to 8,500, but maybe that's not the date of that vase. But that indicates a different story than the one I thought, that this has to do with the rising of the seas. Utnapishtim you met him, right? So this is after 6,000 BC. Perhaps man did live a long time, as they said in those days, because we were pure and the air was pure and we didn't eat as much garbage, and we hadn't broken nature as much, We were eating more natural foods and stuff. I don't know. I'm just guessing. The golden age, survivors of the golden age, or the silver age, maybe that one was. The golden age was before the 12,800 disaster, I'm sure. When Atlantis was destroyed and all other proto-ancient civilizations. Dwarka was destroyed in 6,000. No, maybe not. I don't know. I'll think about that. Maybe it was an earlier impact. Maybe it was from the Hiawatha impact. I don't know. That's my Scooby-Doo. I don't know. So, yeah, I think out loud as I do these things. I'm thinking out loud of what I know. This is how my mind works. I'm thinking about all the things I know and putting them together. So that date now coincides with the Golden Age. So that was the Silver Age or something that ended in 6,000 BC, and then you had the Bronze Age, the Neolithic, and then the Bronze Age. Remember? The Bronze Age. They talk about the Bronze Age, then the Iron Age, the Age of War, because when we had iron, then the swords could kill more effectively. But bronze required tin, and this required the British Isles to be part of the corpus of Mediterranean culture, though. The voyaging to the British Isles would have been there, but the British Isles also would have been overland with Europe at the time until 6,000 BC. Now, Stonehenge was built after that, but really what lies at the bottom of the English Channel and the Irish Sea and the North Sea and the Gulf Black Sea, and around the all perimeter of the Mediterranean, the old Mediterranean. It's kind of boggling, isn't it? Simply as somebody who knows history, that we can now date this now to 12,800 is stunning. We always knew the Hebrew version of 4004 BC, which you'll find in old editions of the King James, the creation in 6 days. Well, maybe more like 6 impacts. But my thing about the harmonics is that cycle of 20,000, 12,800. Doing the calculation in my head. Sorry, I'm slow now. 7,200 years. And then 6,000 BC, they say, for the Davis Lake Ice Dam estimate. 7,200 years after 12,800 is, I'm doing the reverse math in my head. It's hard, I'm an old man. 6,800, 6,000 years later, so it's a little after that. So it's a little sooner. So I was looking at like a harmonic pattern that said 20,000, 12,800, 6,000. I was trying to think of these are all impacts or ion discharges if you're a Velikovskian. But again, there's this issue of the volcanics also being electrical things with the planetary dynamics, also having electrics going on within us between the mantle and the atmosphere, which is everything from volcanoes to crop circles to our own existence to the patterning of our brains and how we came to be and why there's so many of us, why we are able to see this. Now, the ancients could see it, and they did it in poetry and the Upanishads, and in the mythologies. They're actual literal facts, but the Upanishads, they get into things like particle physics. Hindu philosophy is the oldest civilization, and it's now, these are why Indian mathematicians and philosophers in English are the best. You start naming them, novelists also, but their comprehension of their own history, their own cultural, mythological history of the yugas, the cycle of the yugas, is millions of years of cycles. Don't discount the apocryphal accounts of history, my academic friends and my skeptical friends. Don't discount them at all. Learn to read through the garbage and listen past to talk about aliens in the Bible and stuff like that. And this one guy started talking about how it was all Satan's plan. Well, fire itself may be a living force. You see, that's my whole point about the fires. Uh, 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 the war in heaven included fallen angels, including great powers as is in Roger Zelazny's Lord of Light, which is sort of a Buddha kind of novella based on a rebel within a Hindu planet. And it's really complicated. And the rebel is a Christian with a zombie army. Doesn't that sound familiar? Uh, but that they are. As the reason I mentioned this is Zelazny. The whole point of what I was saying about the devastations, that people adapt to destruction. Anyway, it's an interesting book. I'll have to go look at it again, maybe comment on it again, try and come back to this and make a comment. I think people are trying to contact me, and I'm being busy on here. Because this is busy for me. My mind is rolling on this. I should be packing. I should be getting ready. I've got things to do. I will do them today. It's a hot day. It's a hot day. It's going to be a hell of a summer. I'm moving to the Fraser Canyon. I'm probably going to be around smoke and stuff like that. I may have to evacuate. We'll see. I have a nice place to live in the country, away from. And moving out of the lower mainland, I feel like animals are before an earthquake. But here I know there's going to be more than just an earthquake, or sense it coming. I guess that's what it is. I'm glad to be moving to the canyon. A lot of people are when they move out of the lower mainland. So it's not just the inundation of foreign money. People who've lived here for a long time follow all the news about the tectonics and shit, the planets. And a lot of people know about the Lulu Island wave, including up the Fraser Canyon, as I've found. So maybe I'm not just being prescient, I'm just being logical. There's various friends who asked me during the Fukushima disaster, and I came up with the story about the Lulu Island wave. I should tell everybody to get out of the LM now. LM is lower mainland. They call it the 604. It's the old area code. Interior in the island are 250. Now there's 778 province-wide. Anyways, gone are the days of the old times. Gone are the days of the clear blue skies. Is that a contrail or a jet at sea? See? But, they're doing things to try and fix the planet that we don't know about. They're not just trying to destroy the planet, folks. HARP, I think, was an attempt to grapple with the problem. Because they've had Tesla physics going on within the military for decades. And probably Velikovsky too. And probably Reiki and biophysics and Mesmer even, like all these fields that academia dismissed as because the age of reason said they were irrational or because they were associated with superstition or they couldn't be proven empirically because of the narrow box of empiricist thinking of logical positivism. But the poetic mind has seen metaphysics, it knows the ancient histories, it can speak in the paradigms. And it's necessary to why Plato described it as Phaeton plunging as the son of Apollo, because it seemed to come from the sun. But no, it came out of the constellation Scorpio. Where was Scorpio at the time? So this is a sort of final point for everybody, because there's a lot of astronomers maybe who will watch this someday. The Carlson brings up the various comments, as maybe the guys who did this. No, this one landed. But somebody to come up with the commentary cycles that may have hit. The thing is it didn't have to make a hit. It could be a near graze. Like 6,000, I believe was. It was a drive-by. Venus did a drive-by on her way through before becoming where she is now. And that happens in a certain harmonic. Now, 12,100 to 20,000 to 12,800 Just 6,000 is a little shorter together, so that kind of indicates that there is a musical effect going on within the harmony of the spheres. The next one will be before. Uh, how long has it been? Well, it's been 8,200 years. Well, it's probably in the same range, but I guess it's not an even oscillation. That's what I was wondering. But the commentary records and human history and all of what the writings that exist have survived of the augurs that the Christians didn't burn, and all the hidden books of search for the great books that were destroyed by the Christians that may yet survive, and also of all the other religions that now go read everything. I'm speaking this to all the classicists in the world who think, yes, a lot did happen in Greece in terms of the human mind, and we had our friend Socrates who broke the ancient mind and ended the great trade in frankincense by eventually Christianity came along and Islam and burned much. And just what they stopped burning bodies and the pagans closed the pagan temples, so there was no more demand for frankincense. And it broke the power of Axum and the link between India and the West, which was Axum and Persia. That is so much of you have to get outside the Western paradigm and get the global paradigm. And this applies to planetary dynamics as well as to human history because we're part of it. We're part of it. Even all the conflagrations between humans are also animosity is kind of electrical too. When you just meet somebody and your hair stands up and then your back, is that or not electrical in your body? Of course it is. Your body is an electrobiotic organism, right? Biomechanical machine, electrochemical. We are a neural net, but does our neural net manifest because of something that makes it manifest, like they solve the divine plan, but the self-intelligent fire forming a pattern used out of our DNA, forming like who I am and who you are, who we've become, and maybe some of those patterns conflict automatically, and certainly logic can, and belief can, but also post-traumatic stress can. So all this is all the wars of the religions, the wars between cultures, and so like I watched the one video and was it Carlson again? Maybe it was, and he just had Egypt, Hittites, Mitanni's, Egypt, so on that area of the world, without having everyone else. He didn't know about Axum, although he does mention it without understanding how fundamental it was in the ancient world. It was one of the great civilizations. And I say that Celtic and Nordic civilization also were, and whatever was in Central Asia that we don't know about yet, the hidden cities of the Kaf, of the Caucasus, and the Great Caucasus, the Khyber and the Karakoram, and the cities said to be hidden under the earth all over the place. The vault said to be hidden under the Isle of Man, where Merlin put the giants to sleep. I had Dame Sybil Leek's book. I found that out. There's all kinds of stories in there. The bones of the giants call to me. They want to be known. They want their story to be known. They find them all the time. And the pagans too. The story of the pagans who fled the old world for the new and settled here. And bits of their ruins remain in Kansas and Alaska, Massachusetts. There's bits of ruins, here and there. The Punics fled, the devastations of the devastations, both of the flood and of 6,000 BC. The proto Punic civilization, with or without things, but everybody crossed the seas. We had overseas contact. Look at the Polynesians. Look at the Polynesians and the Phoenicians. The Punics are vastly underestimated in Western history, and they're fundamental to an understanding of both Islamic history and Christian history, which obliterated the memories of it, as did the rising of the seas. And previously, the Hiawatha impact did another number on the lower lands, the lowlands beneath the sea, lost countries. Before the Hyborian Age, when Atlantis fell, which was now we know was 12,800, till the rise of the kings of Egypt and Sumer. So I'm going to start calling that the Hyborian Age for formal 12,800 to the rise of Egypt and Sumer is the Hyborian Age, and we have cities and histories and archaeological remains there now. We know the archaeological and geological history. This is a fascinating time, and I'm not in academia, and I should be lecturing this. Maybe I got to do this online here, and I'm hoping for your help to make this a video channel. I'm not going to try and sell T-shirts and stuff like that, but I may have to. I don't know, but I need help doing that because I can't organize it by myself. I'm just a bachelor. I'm 63, disabled. But everything I know, because I've been through surgery, I've been reading more and everything's digesting it. I'm a classicist, I'm a scientist, I'm a historian. I'm a politician. I believe in human destiny and the human reason that we can maybe survive this. If we learn the bio, if we learn the electric theory of the universe and of medicine, understand the effects of the real effects of the history of our mythologies on us, which are also the religious and spiritual psychological paradigms that have grown up since, like Buddha in his transcendence of nirvana, which maybe is just your in continuum, with the bioelectric field of the universe, like they say mushrooms do. That's what McKenna says about mushrooms do, right? Put you in tune with the universe, right? Maybe there's real mechanisms for the interplanetary civilization. I don't know. I don't know. All I know is I can see a lot of the elements of it brings Arthur C. Clarke's childhood's end in mind, because the young people of this planet aren't facing the overmind, they're facing the rising of the seas, and they may rise and take control of their destiny soon, because they're all angry, they're all angry. France is only the beginning. France is only the beginning. I'm speaking of the Yellow Vests. And Italy, the Italian government, the Five-Star movement just endorsed them. I don't know whether they'll also send in support, if you know what I mean. But NATO is broken. The EU is broken. The world order is broken. The UN is taking no serious action to stop Canada from doing what it's doing to the unsurrendered territories, despite the. Do I have food on my? Tried to get rid of my food on my beard. Despite the. Both sides, eh? I'm looking at it now. Finally, I thought I checked in the mirror. But in the Wet'suwet'en situation, and the general abuse of Indigenous title by the Canadian imperial state, which has been revealed as nothing more than a corporate militarist state, and the bureaucracy, the bureaucratic state using authoritarian power and military and paramilitary force and policing power since the creation of both the colonies of Canada and of British Columbia, for the systematic overriding of existing governments that have been there for thousands of years, that should be legally by imperial law, the 1763 proclamation by George III, which mandated the creation of Quebec. I'm getting into Canadian politics now here, I'm sorry, but I'm going to finish this, I'll cut it out, I guess. The Quebec Act was a direct result of the Royal Proclamation. You had to come to terms with the locals with a deal, so the Catholics got the deal basically. And they kept the Quebecois under their thumbs for a century and a half. But the Catholic elite, the Seigneurie, they cut a deal with the British. But out west of the Rockies, very few treaties were signed, and this has been a geopolitical interregnum for a while. That's been an occupation by Canada that has now come to a head. And it's raised the ire of all the natives of Canada for what's been done to them, which is awful. Every bit as bad as what was done in the United States, is not as bloody. Sometimes bloody, though. But famine's bloody in its own right, isn't it? And smallpox, isn't it? Never mind the residential schools. So you have a situation where you now have the same act that created the same royal proclamation that created Quebec is not being respected by a government based by a prime minister from Quebec, like his father was, who doesn't care about the lack of treaties in BC. His father did nothing to stop the deforestation of the land set aside for land claims in 1976. Or actually, he must have consented to Bill Bennett having U.S. Marines nearby in case the general strike went forward, which we know about now, and many of us knew at the time. And young Canadians don't know, and the world doesn't know how authoritarian and militaristic and brutal the Canadian government can be. I could go through the long history of it. I mentioned in my former video about the history of the RCMP by two University of Saskatchewan professors. You can't find it in bookstores. You have to order it online, and nobody's reprinting it. Well, please translate it in other languages, okay? And it should be part of the curriculum about Canadian history. That people should know the truth about, not the official lines about what Tourism Board and what the Mounties themselves say. The Mounties are the people, that they were the conquering force for the West, sent in by the Canadas when Rupert's Land was sold, and all the people within it to Canada for conquest. And the Métis stood up, and also on behalf of the natives, and they were crushed twice. Anyways, Canadian history I could go on about, but this has now reached a head in the world, So it's not just France. It's not just Italy supporting France, and the Canadian Yellow Vests are on the wrong track. I'm the real one. Uh, what Canada needs is wholesale reform and democracy, and really from the provincial level on up. And if we don't wind up as the same country afterwards, so be it. Confederation has been a farce and a corporatist, elitist, exploitationist, manipulative regime that doesn't even have title to places like British Columbia, most of British Columbia, and places like the Mackenzie Valley. What's this saying to me here now? Something's telling me I've got a problem. Better end this. This is the professor, Mike Clevin, on his porch on a hot sunny day in January, waiting for the great fires of the spring in the Fraser Canyon. Hopefully they're all farther north this year and I won't have to evacuate. But I have a nice place to go to, and this is where I've been living, and it's a nice day now. You can